Okay, let's dive in. You're scrolling your feed, see a puppy, then boom, something that just completely sets you off.
Happens all the time.
Right. And it really highlights this weird tension we're all feeling, like the insane power of one post versus this big question mark over who should be hitting the brakes, if anyone.
Absolutely. So that's exactly what we're tackling in this deep dive. Free speech, censorship, control, actually. Who's in charge on social media.
And we're basing this on a report that really lays out the different sides of the argument, right?
Yeah, exactly. The mission here is to unpack the core arguments, both for and against content moderation, drawing straight from that analysis, getting to the heart of it.
Okay, so first off, the sheer scale is mind-boggling, like 4.5 billion people online.
It's huge. And that number itself kind of forces the first argument, doesn't it? The need for some kind of moderation, just for basic safety.
How can you even manage that kind of crowd without rules?
Well, the report gives some pretty stark examples. Look at Facebook. Back in 2021, they took down, over 25 million posts just for COVID misinformation?
25 million, wow.
Yeah. I mean, that volume alone tells you something about the challenge, the potential for harm circulating.
And you see the flip side too, don't you? Like with Twitter or X now, reports of pulling back on moderation staff, then all this scrutiny about hate speech may be increasing.
Exactly. It becomes this sort of real-time experiment. What happens when you ease up on those controls?
Which brings in the legal angle. The report mentions Danielle Citron, a First Amendment expert.
Right. And she has this quote that really challenges how we might usually think about it. She says, "Free speech is not a free pass for harm. The internet is not a constitutional zone. It's a private ecosystem."
A private ecosystem. That's interesting. So not like a public park where anything goes, legally speaking.
That's the idea. Since these platforms are private companies, the argument is they aren't bound by the First Amendment in the same way the government is. They can set their own rules for their ecosystem.
But that feels tricky, right? If they define harm, couldn't that just become a way to shut down views they don't like, even legitimate ones?
And that's the absolute core of the tension. But the pro-moderation side takes it further. They argue the algorithms themselves are part of the problem.
How so?
Well, you know how algorithms often push stuff that gets strong reactions? Likes, shares, angry comments.
Yeah, engagement is king.
Exactly. But often, it's the extreme, the outrageous stuff that gets the most engagement. So the argument goes, these platforms inherently amplify negativity or extremism if left unchecked.
Okay. So moderation from that viewpoint isn't really censorship. It's more like a course correction, trying to counter the algorithm's own biases.
Kind of, yeah. They frame it as curation for a healthier space, given how the tech itself works.
And does public opinion lean that way?
It seems like it, to an extent. The report cites a Pew Research study from 2023, found that 68% of Americans think social media companies do have a responsibility to restrict harmful content.
68%, that's quite high.
It is, even if it means limiting some speech. It suggests a lot of people see the potential for real-world harm and want the platforms to step in somehow.
But I bet there's disagreement on what counts as harmful.
Oh, absolutely. That's where it gets incredibly muddy. But the general sentiment seems to be leaning towards some platform responsibility.
Now, the report apparently mentions some more fringe ideas supporting moderation, like AI social scores.
Yeah, it touches on that briefly, the idea of like an AI judging your online behavior, similar to systems in China, but it flags it as very fringe and obviously super controversial in democratic societies, not a mainstream proposal at all.
Okay, good. That sounds dystopian.
Oh.
Which kind of sets us up nicely for the other side of the coin, right? The argument against all this control.
Exactly. The core argument there is pretty straightforward. Call it moderation, call it curation, it's still censorship at the end of the day.
And the worry is about who gets to decide.
Precisely. Once you let corporations or even governments define acceptable speech, you're giving up a fundamental principle. That's the fear.
The report mentions Elon Musk's stance when he took over Twitter.
Yes, his quote, "Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy." That really captures the essence of this perspective. Protect the speech, even the stuff you hate.
And the concern is that this content policing can become biased.
That's a major criticism, that it shifts from stopping genuine harm to becoming ideological filtering, where, inconvenient truths or dissenting views just get slapped with a misinformation label and disappear.
Is there evidence people are feeling that way?
Well, the report mentions a Knight Foundation finding trust in these platforms is apparently at an all-time low.
Really? Across the board?
particularly, it seems, among conservatives and younger users. And yeah, it seems linked to worries about censorship, feeling like certain viewpoints are unfairly targeted.
Like what kind of examples?
The report points to things like debates around COVID origins or treatments, questions about election integrity, discussions on gender. Content getting flagged or removed in those areas has definitely fueled mistrust and accusations of bias.
Hmm. And there's a historian quoted Timothy Snyder with a pretty stark warning.
Yeah, it's quite chilling. Authoritarianism begins with control of speech. Today's platforms are tomorrow's regimes. It really frames the stakes, suggesting this isn't just about online arguments, but potentially about future societal control.
Wow. That really puts it in perspective. It forces that fundamental question the report brings up. Should these platforms just be like utilities?
Right? Like the phone company.
Hmm.
They connect you, but they don't police your conversation unless it's like actually illegal activity,
Hmm.
minimal interference.
Or should they keep being these referees, making judgment calls on what's okay to say in their space?
It's a huge fork in the road, really, with very different outcomes depending on which path we go down.
And just like on the pro-moderation side, there are fringe views against it too. Something about conspiracy theories.
Yeah, the report mentions unverified theories about some kind of global censorship alliance using AI and NGOs to manipulate narratives. It stresses there's no credible evidence for these specific elaborate claims.
Okay, important distinction.
But then, interestingly, it connects the general anxiety behind some of those views to things like the Twitter files.
Ah, the leaks showing government talking to Twitter about moderation.
Exactly. While the full context and impact are still debated, those reported instances of government influence, however limited, definitely give some people pause. It feeds that worry about hidden hands potentially shaping what we see online, even if the wilder conspiracy theories aren't true.
So it kind of taps into a real underlying concern about transparency and power. Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, it's clear this whole free speech online thing is, well, it's messy and changing constantly. Are we strengthening free expression overall, or are we weakening it? It doesn't feel like there's an easy answer.
Definitely not. And the report leaves us with two really potent opposing thoughts that capture that tension perfectly. One perspective is moderation protects the vulnerable. Platforms must be accountable for the voices they amplify.
Makes sense, protecting people from harm. But then the counter is just as strong. Once you regulate speech, you regulate thought. Free speech must include the uncomfortable.
You can see the dilemma, and it leads to this final, really thought-provoking line from the report. The future of expression may not be about yelling louder, but deciding who gets the mic.
Ooh, that hits hard. Who gets the mic? So the final question I want to leave you, the listener, with is this. In this digital town square we all inhabit now, where do you think the balance lies? Between keeping things safe and protecting that fundamental right to speak freely.
And maybe even what role should we, as individuals using these platforms, play in finding that balance? Something to think about.